My name is Ivy Calder, 32 years old. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing patient files at the clinic. The subject line read, Legal Notice, Estate of Eleanor Mitchell. At first I thought it was routine paperwork, maybe something about tax filings or property transfer, but as I clicked it open, my hands froze. It wasn't from the estate lawyer I'd been working with. It was from a firm I'd never heard of. The message was clinical, detached, almost cold. Your parents, Victoria and Michael Calder, have filed a petition contesting the will of Eleanor Mitchell, alleging undue influence and manipulation of an elderly woman with diminished capacity. I reread that line 3 times, waiting for it to stop making sense. It never did. My parents, the same people who'd walked out of my life when I was 2, the people I hadn't seen or spoken to in 3 decades. Now they were taking me to court. I stared at the monitor for a long time, the hum of the clinic's air conditioner the only sound in the room. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th breath, anger began to dissolve into disbelief. They were accusing me of manipulating the one person who had never manipulated anyone, my grandmother Eleanor. That night, I sat in the kitchen of my apartment, staring at the unopened letter from the estate lawyer, still sitting on the counter, next to a half-eaten takeout box. I could almost hear Grandma's voice from memory, low and steady. Don't let anyone rewrite the truth just because they weren't there to live it. To understand why this lawsuit was absurd, you'd have to understand my life and the people who actually raised me. I don't remember living with Victoria and Michael. My first real memories are of Grandpa Robert's laughter echoing in the hallway and Grandma Eleanor humming while she cooked. Their house smelled like roses and cinnamon, a strange mix that only existed there. They became my whole world, steady, predictable, kind. When I was 10, I asked Grandma why I didn't have parents like the other kids. She didn't dodge the question. She sat me down at the kitchen table, poured 2 cups of tea, one for her, one mostly sugar for me, and said, Your parents were very young when you were born. They thought they were ready. They weren't. Did they not want me? I remember asking. Grandma's face softened. They thought about not having you at all. But your grandpa and I asked them to let you come into the world. We promised to help. We thought maybe they'd grow to love you. She reached for my hand, the kind of small gesture that said everything words couldn't. They tried for 2 years, but when you turned 2, they decided they couldn't do it anymore. So we adopted you. You became our daughter, and we became your parents. I didn't cry. Even at 10, I understood what she was saying. My parents didn't want me, but my grandparents did, and that was enough. Still, I learned early that enough doesn't always last forever. When I was 11, I crept downstairs one night for water and heard Grandma's voice coming from the kitchen phone. She sounded angry, a tone I'd never heard from her. You could at least see her sometimes, Victoria, just once in a while. My mother's voice came through, sharp even through the static. We love Emma. We want to raise her. Ivy was a mistake, Mom. She was a burden we couldn't handle. We're different people now. Don't start this again. There was a pause, a silence that seemed to stretch through the walls. So you can love one daughter but not the other? Grandma asked quietly. Emma wasn't a mistake, Victoria said. She's the child we chose. Stop asking about Ivy. She has you. That's enough. I went back upstairs and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. Grandma never brought them up again after that night, and I never asked. I just learned that sometimes love means accepting what you'll never get back. From that point on, I stopped thinking of them as parents. They became strangers with my last name. Grandma and Grandpa were the ones who showed up for every science fair, every recital, every graduation. They taught me how to drive, helped me move into my dorm, and sent care packages when I couldn't afford groceries in medical school. When I got my first job at the clinic, I started visiting every Sunday. We'd cook together. Her famous carrot cake was always the highlight, and watch old movies in the living room afterward. Even after Grandpa died 3 years ago, we never broke the Sunday ritual. If anything, it became sacred. Rain or shine, I'd drive to her house, arms full of groceries and flowers. She used to tease me, saying I worked harder in her rose garden than I did at my job, but I knew she loved it. The garden was her pride, rows of soft pink roses that seemed to glow at sunset. Then, 3 months ago, she passed away quietly in her sleep, 87 years old. The house felt too still after that, the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room but echoes in your chest. I handled the arrangements, sorted through her things, and found her will. Everything, her savings, the house, even the garden, she left to me. When the estate lawyer confirmed it, I cried. Not because of the inheritance, but because it felt like one last "I choose you" from her. And now here I was, being told I'd stolen that choice. The next day, I hired a lawyer, Karen Roth. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. "They're claiming you isolated Eleanor from her daughter," she said, scanning the documents. "They'll argue you manipulated her into leaving everything to you." "That's ridiculous," I said. "They never called. They never visited." "Can you prove that?" I nodded. Grandma kept diaries, 30 years worth, every missed holiday, every broken promise. Karen's eyes lifted. "You still have them?" "All of them, in boxes at my apartment." "Good," she said, closing the folder. "Then we'll let Eleanor tell her own story." The next 2 weeks felt like living in the past. I spent every night reading through those diaries, the pages worn and dotted with ink stains. There were hundreds of entries, short, sometimes just a sentence, but they painted a clear picture. December 20th, 1998. Victoria called, said she'll come for Christmas. Ivy's excited. I baked extra cookies. December 15th, 2000. Victoria says she's definitely coming this time. I told Ivy not to get her hopes up. December 20th, 2001. Victoria called crying. Said she's sorry for missing the last 3 years. Ivy said she doesn't care anymore. Each page was a wound reopening, proof written in Grandma's neat cursive that love can be one-sided. The morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse early. The marble floor was cold beneath my heels, the air smelling faintly of coffee and anxiety. Karen walked beside me, her stride purposeful, her tone calm. "They'll try to rattle you," she said softly. "Stay steady. You have the truth. That's stronger than outrage." I nodded, clutching the folder of diaries to my chest. Inside the courtroom, the world seemed to shrink. At the far table sat Victoria and Michael. My mother's hair was shorter than I remembered, gray at the temples, but the same sharpness lingered in her posture. Michael sat stiffly beside her, his hands folded too tightly. And behind them, Emma. She was 21 now. I'd seen photos online, a bright smile, perfect life, the daughter they'd chosen. She didn't look at me. Not once. Karen leaned in. "Remember, we don't have to be louder, just clearer." I took my seat, my heart pounding in time with the ticking clock above the judge's bench. 30 years of silence had led to this moment. I wasn't here to win money. I was here to defend the only family that had ever chosen me. Jonathan Stevens opened with a voice smooth enough to make lies sound like empathy. "Your Honor," he said, glancing toward the judge, "this case is about an elderly woman, cut off from her daughter, manipulated by a younger relative who stood to gain everything." He gestured toward me like I was a headline, not a person. "Sophia, excuse me." Ivy called her. Isolated her grandmother from her only daughter, ensuring that when Eleanor Mitchell passed, the estate would fall entirely into her hands. My stomach twisted. It wasn't rage yet, just disbelief at how confidently someone could rearrange decades of neglect into a story that made my parents the victims. Then Karen stood up. No theatrics, no raised voice, just quiet authority. "Your Honor, this case is actually quite simple. Eleanor Mitchell made a deliberate, informed decision to leave her estate to the person who stayed. For 30 years, Ivy Calder never missed a Sunday dinner, never missed a birthday, never left. Meanwhile, Victoria and Michael Calder abandoned their daughter at age 2 and resurfaced only when they smelled money." The courtroom murmured. Then came the evidence. Karen started with Grandma's diaries. All 30 years of them stacked in boxes like a timeline of truth. She read them aloud, entries about birthdays, piano recitals, graduation ceremonies, each one a record of broken promises and waiting that never ended. April 15th, 2003. Called Victoria about Ivy's piano recital next week. She said she'll try to make it. I know she won't. June 15th, 2007. Ivy gave her valedictorian speech. Brilliant. Victoria and Michael weren't there. Sent a card with $50. It felt like being dissected on the stand. My childhood laid bare in sentences written long before this day. The judge, Davis, listened without a word, pen still, her expression unreadable. Next came witnesses. Mrs. Chan from next door took the stand first, her gray hair pinned neatly in a bun. "I saw Ivy every Sunday," she said. "Rain, snow, didn't matter. always with groceries and flowers. But Victoria? Never. Not once. Then Mr. Patterson from across the street confirmed the same. Then Mrs. Rodriguez, 2 houses down. Rosa followed, small, soft-spoken, her hands folded in her lap. She'd been with my grandparents for 25 years. After Robert passed, how often did Ivy visit Eleanor? Karen asked. Every week, every single Sunday, Rosa said. They cooked together, laughed together. Eleanor said Sundays were her favorite days. And how often did Victoria visit? Rosa looked down. Never, not once. Jonathan tried to poke holes in her testimony, but Rosa's calm eyes didn't waver. You think I don't know who cared for Eleanor? She said quietly. I cleaned that house for decades. I saw who showed up. Then Jonathan called his trump card. Your Honor, the defense's case relies heavily on the assumption that Eleanor Mitchell was of sound mind, he said, adjusting his tie, but we intend to show she was not. Dr. Christopher Wilson took the stand, young, confident, the kind of man who smiled as if he were doing everyone a favor by existing. I treated Eleanor Mitchell in her final year, he said. She exhibited confusion, anxiety, and clear signs of cognitive decline. In my professional opinion, she was incapable of making rational decisions regarding her estate. Jonathan's smile widened. Did she ever express concerns about Ivy? Yes, Wilson said, his voice steady. She told me she was worried Ivy only wanted her money, that she was being pressured to change her will. Gasps rippled through the room. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I wanted to shout, to tell the judge this man was lying, but Karen's hand brushed mine, a silent command to wait. Then came her turn. Dr. Wilson, Karen said, when did you open your practice in San Diego? About 8 months ago, he replied. And who did you open it with? He hesitated. Dr. David Thompson. Karen lifted a document. Dr. Thompson is the cousin of Michael Calder, isn't he? A long pause. Yes. And how many times did you actually see Eleanor? I don't recall. Karen cut him off, flipping through papers. 2 times. Once in January, once in February. Both visits arranged by Victoria Calder, correct? Wilson shifted in his seat. She did request the evaluations. And you prescribed sedatives for anxiety? Yes. At her request? He swallowed. Yes. Karen nodded. Did you ever consult Eleanor's primary physician, Dr. Paul Johnson, who treated her for 32 years? No. Karen turned to the judge. Dr. Johnson's records show Eleanor's cognitive functions were intact. She managed her finances, made medical decisions, and lived independently. You saw her twice, under the request of a woman contesting her mother's will. No further questions. Wilson looked suddenly smaller, the kind of man who realized too late that money can't buy integrity. Then Dr. Paul Johnson took the stand. Silver hair, calm eyes, thick medical files under his arm. Eleanor Mitchell's mind was sharp until the end, he said simply. She could recall details from decades ago. She made every medical and financial decision on her own. There were no signs of dementia or decline. Jonathan didn't even bother cross-examining. The truth was stacking too high to climb over. Karen wasn't finished. She called Robert Chen, Grandma's financial advisor for 20 years. He brought spreadsheets, receipts, transfers, each one a paper scar of generosity. For the past 2 decades, Hamamayan Chen said, Eleanor sent Victoria and Michael $1,250 every month. That's $300,000 total. She said it was to help raise Emma, to make sure the child had everything she needed. The courtroom went silent. Even Judge Davis glanced up, eyebrows raised. Karen turned to the judge. So, Eleanor provided for her daughter and granddaughter financially, without ever receiving a visit or phone call in return. And yet we're to believe she was manipulated into disinheriting them? Jonathan's jaw tightened. Then, to everyone's surprise, Karen called Michael himself to the stand. He shuffled forward, clearly unprepared. Mr. Calder, she said, how many of Ivy's graduations did you attend? He blinked. I don't recall. Kindergarten, elementary, high school, college, medical school, how many? He fidgeted. None. What did she study in college? Law, I think. She studied medicine, Karen said, letting the silence hang heavy. She's a cardiologist. Did you know that? He looked helplessly at Jonathan. Not exactly. Karen stepped back. No further questions. My father's shoulders sagged as he walked away. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. The court adjourned for the day. In the hallway, the air felt thick, like even the building was exhausted. I stood by the window, watching people trickle out into the gray afternoon, when I heard the voice I hadn't heard in 30 years. Ivy. Victoria's tone was soft, almost maternal, but too late for that word to mean anything. She stepped closer. This trial is tearing the family apart. We can still fix it. Settle privately. Half for you, half for Emma. I laughed. Quiet, sharp. You think this is about money? She didn't blink. It's about fairness. You left me, I said. You forgot I existed, and now you want half of what she left me. You're both her granddaughters, she insisted. Emma deserves something. She deserves your love. Try giving her that. Her expression hardened. You'll regret this, Ivy. Family doesn't stay silent forever. Funny, I said, stepping past her. That's exactly what you did. That night, my phone lit up with missed calls, then texts, pleading, threatening, guilt-laced. You'll ruin everything. You'll regret turning your back on family. Karen told me to document everything. It's harassment, she said. If they keep it up, we'll use it. I tried to sleep, but my mind replayed the day. Dr. Wilson's smug grin, Victoria's icy calm, Emma's eyes refusing to meet mine. In the middle of the night, I went through one of Grandma's old phones I'd kept in a drawer. Most messages were ordinary, reminders, grocery lists, but one caught my eye, a saved voicemail. A woman's voice, my mother's. Dr. Wilson, it's Victoria. Please make sure the report mentions confusion and anxiety. Mother can't be trusted with these decisions anymore. Just make it official. I froze, the phone still in my hand. Karen didn't know about this yet, but I did. And suddenly, I understood what Grandma meant whenever she said, "The truth doesn't hide. It waits." The next hearing was in 2 weeks. Until then, I would wait too. The morning of the final hearing was so still it felt unnatural. No traffic hum, no chatter, just the low drone of the courthouse's fluorescent lights. I stood outside the courtroom door with the voicemail saved on my phone, wondering if it would ever need to be played. Karen had told me not to rush. We already have more than enough, she'd said, but I'd seen enough of my parents' desperation to know they weren't above rewriting history twice. Inside, the courtroom filled slowly. Victoria and Michael took their seats at the far table, whispering to their lawyer. Emma followed them in a moment later, avoiding my eyes. I'd expected resentment, but what I saw in her face was worse. Confusion. Maybe even shame. She was only a child when they left me behind. She'd grown up in a story where I didn't exist. Judge Davis entered, her expression neutral, her steps precise. The air tightened as she signaled for the closing arguments to begin. Jonathan Stevens stood. Your Honor, he began, this case is about family, about the duty we owe those who raised us and the bonds that should never be severed. Ms. Calder exploited a vulnerable woman's loneliness to gain control of her estate, cutting her mother and sister out of their rightful legacy. He paused, as if expecting sympathy, but the silence that followed was heavy and hollow. Then Karen rose. She didn't look at my parents, only at the judge. Your Honor, this case isn't about family. It's about choice. Eleanor Mitchell wasn't confused, and she wasn't coerced. She was abandoned by her own daughter and son-in-law. And for 30 years, the only person who stayed was Ivy. She picked up a stack of papers. We've seen the diaries. 30 years of broken promises. We've seen the call records. Hundreds of unanswered calls. We've seen the photographs. Birthdays, graduations, holidays, every milestone with one glaring absence. And we've seen the bank transfers. $300,000 sent to the very people now claiming neglect. She let each word settle before continuing. Eleanor Mitchell made her decision with a sound mind and a full heart. She didn't leave her estate to Ivy out of manipulation. She left it out of love. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably, but Karen wasn't finished. She reached into her folder. And finally, Your Honor, there's this. It was a single sheet of paper. I recognized the handwriting before she unfolded it. Grandma's looping cursive, careful and deliberate. This letter was written 2 weeks before Eleanor's passing, Karen said. She gave it to her financial advisor with instructions that it be used only if her will was contested. She began to read. I leave everything to Ivy, not because she is my granddaughter, but because she stayed. When my daughter abandoned her child, Ivy could have grown bitter. She could have turned her heart away. Instead, she became my joy. She never missed a Sunday dinner. She held my hand when Robert died. She made sure I was never alone. Victoria remembers me when money is involved. Ivy remembered me every week. This is my choice. made with a clear mind and a grateful heart. Eleanor Mitchell. When Karen finished, the room was completely silent. Victoria's eyes shimmered, but not from grief. They were the eyes of someone realizing they had lost, not someone regretting why. Michael looked down at his hands. Emma's lip trembled. Judge Davis studied the letter for a long moment, then placed it neatly on her bench. I had the privilege of being taught by Eleanor Mitchell, she said quietly. She was one of the sharpest legal minds I've ever encountered. She taught me to rely on evidence, not emotion. She shuffled through the stack of documents beside her. Here's the evidence. 30 years of diaries documenting abandonment, phone records proving silence, financial records proving continued support, a letter confirming intent. Everything points to one truth. Eleanor Mitchell knew exactly what she was doing. She raised her eyes. Therefore, the court rules in favor of the defendant, Ivy Calder. The will stands as written. Furthermore, Victoria and Michael Calder are ordered to pay all legal fees for bringing this baseless claim. Case dismissed. The gavel struck once, echoing through the room like a final heartbeat. It was over. My parents stood immediately. Victoria's face was unreadable, the kind of expression that only exists when pride refuses to acknowledge defeat. Michael followed her out without a word. Emma lingered for half a second, eyes flickering toward me as if she wanted to speak. But she didn't. She turned and left. Karen placed a steady hand on my shoulder. You won, she said softly. I nodded, but the word won didn't feel quite right. What I felt was release. Outside, the air was sharp and bright, sunlight spilling over the courthouse steps. I took a deep breath for the first time in months. Will you tell them about the voicemail? Karen asked as we descended the stairs. No, I said. The truth already spoke for itself. She smiled faintly. Good. Let the silence belong to them this time. That was a year ago. I'm 33 now. The house is still mine, though I think of it as hers. The rose garden blooms every spring. Rosa still comes every Saturday to bake carrot cake, refusing to retire. The walls smell like sugar and memories. I've kept Grandma's Sunday dinners alive, but I changed the tradition. The table isn't quiet anymore. I invite people, friends from the clinic, neighbors, even Rosa's nieces. Last weekend, 12 people crowded around the table, laughing and passing plates. For the first time, the house felt alive again, not haunted. When everyone left, I walked into the kitchen and pulled out the sealed envelope Rosa had given me the day of the first hearing. I'd never opened it. My hand shook slightly as I tore it open. Inside was a small photograph. Me, at about 5 years old, kneeling beside a rose bush, petals bigger than my hands. On the back, written in Grandma's looping script, were 5 words. What we tend, grows, ivy. I stared at it until my vision blurred. The next morning, I visited the cemetery. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that makes colors look truer. I knelt beside their graves, Eleanor and Robert, and placed a bouquet of roses I'd cut that morning. I won, I said quietly, but I think you already knew I would. The wind rustled through the trees. For a moment, it felt like an answer. I don't know where Victoria and Michael are now. I don't wonder. I don't hate them either. Hate is just another way of keeping someone close. I've learned that letting go is a kind of love too, love for yourself. Emma reached out once, months after the verdict. A message online. You ruined our family. You're selfish. I read it twice, then blocked her. Some people can't understand that the family you build can be stronger than the one you're born into. These days, my Sunday dinners are louder, messier, happier. People show up with stories and laughter. Rosa's carrot cake always ends up half gone before it's even sliced properly. Every night, before I lock up, I glance at that photograph by the kitchen window. The little girl in the rose garden. The one Grandma never stopped believing in. I don't think of inheritance as money anymore. It's what you carry forward, the love, the lessons, the courage to stay when others leave. I inherited all of that. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough.